Welcome to the Pen Leader Podcast, where strategic leaders get straight to the topics, strengthening our awareness and sharpening our minds. The Pen Leader Podcast is produced by Roar, a production division of Mays & Associates Ltd. Find out more at www.maysassociatesltd.com. Now here is your award-winning host, Dr. Shanda Gore.
And welcome to the Pen Leader Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about closing gifts, opening doors. And I am glad to have with me two great individuals who have been working on closing those gifts to make sure those opening doors happens to a number of organizations. And so I have with me Barbara Tartaglia-Poure, who is the managing director at Carter, a global consulting firm that helps nonprofit organizations advance their philanthropic goals. She is one of 119 professionals in the world who hold the Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive Credential. It's the highest level of achievement in the fundraising profession. She has more than 25 years of experience working in higher education fundraising. She's done capital campaigns, securing major and principal gifts, and she not only has a proven track record of closing several large gifts, but she also has a master's degree in leadership and organizational development. She's passionate and empowering nonprofit leaders and fundraisers that are out there. I also have with me Joy McKee, who is the Assistant Dean for Development and Alumni Relations, Boston University College of Arts and Sciences. And she's an experienced fundraiser, marketing, communications professional, and she has more than 20 years of experience working alongside nonprofits to build collaborative relationships, which we talk about that on the show so much, with individuals, communities, corporations, and foundations. And she actually has an advanced certified fundraising executive credential, and it is the most rigorous certification process available out there for development for those that are fundraising or thinking about fundraising. So without further ado, welcome, ladies.
Thank you, Shanda. Thanks for having us.
Here.
So great. It's amazing all of your credentials and what you've gathered over, so many years of really working the space and making a difference. And I'm going to get right into it because I have a number of listeners, not only in my region, but across the world that are working on either fundraising or thinking about organization within the organization. How do they raise funds for their organization? And you do so much work in that. So I'm going to start with the first piece of this, which is amazing that you just presented at the Association for Fundraising Professionals, their annual conference. And so, Barbara, I'll start with you. Can you please start with a snapshot of what you did during that presentation?
Absolutely. Well, it's always a privilege to be invited to present at AFP at their international conference, and it's such an experience. There's about Joy, about 3,500 fundraisers from all around the world, and having that opportunity to lead a conversation about leadership and really leveling up. So the work that Joy and I have focused in on is leadership development with teams and individuals specific to their personal and professional brands. But bottom line, how do you take a team in your organization and really help lift them up so they're doing their best work and working cohesively as a team? That's what we've found together that really excites us both. And I'll just say that working with Joy, when we realized what we had, the synergies and the common focus, it's like capturing lightning in a bottle. That's what this feels like. And Joy, go ahead and just kind of lean into that, would you?
So Barbara, I was thinking back as you were mentioning our presentation, and I was thinking back that we first were introduced and met in 2017. You may, for the listeners, Shanda, I think that they probably noticed we both have the ACFRE. We had both completed this very intense process in credentialing, so this personal and professional growth. And it became very clear to us, to Barbara's point about lightning in a bottle, that we shared a common purpose. We, in this case, had a common person that introduced us. And as we began talking and visiting, we recognized some common faith and beliefs and trajectories. And that was when magic started to happen. And we realized that this synergy, this trajectory was something we could tap into for what now we're referring to as the unending power of possibility.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you talk about the fact that both of you have there's such a limited, number in the world of individuals who hold this credentialing. And when you talk about coming together, both of you have this common background, but actually live in different parts of the United States, and you come together at this conference that all the other major fundraisers come to learn from one another, and you're providing a stage to talk about your successes, what you think it is about with teams, and what that looks like moving forward. Can you give a couple of items on how you build? I know you talk about trust and authentic relationships. Can you talk about that, especially in the high stakes donor environment? And Joy, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, Barbara and I, too, the way we met, we kind of came up with this mantra, if you will, that in leadership, it's very rare that we sit down, we take a breath, and we really look out the window and think about ourselves as leaders. And we wanted to present that space, and we wanted to provide some of the things through demonstrating our journey. And one of those demonstrations, one of those items that we like to share and just shared when we were in Seattle presenting is our own influences. What is influencing us right now? How and what information am I taking and thinking on? And so it's a good time for me to acknowledge one of my influences. And it really is Brene Brown and her work on authenticity. And this is something that I have really taken to heart and shared with, I want to share it today with our listeners, but shared at the conference we were just at. Over the years, I've read quite a few of Brene's books, Thoughts, The Gifts of Imperfection, which is kind of letting go of who you think you should be and embracing who you are. Read The Atlas of the Heart, where she explores emotions and experiences that define what it means to be human. But most recently, I had reread Dare to Lead, and she had asserted a foundational skill, which is the important part of courage building. And that foundational skill is rumbling with vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And I have found that to rumble and have real conversations, even when they're tough, and getting into the habit of it, that vulnerability side is the emotion we experience during times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And I have found that to be a very powerful way that leads to trust and authenticity in leadership, which I thought was very well received and has been well received in opening up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that it's a baseline for when we talk about with pen leaders, where that strength of character is so critically important. And that comes to that authenticity. And, individuals, you and I, Barbara, we all know when people are not being authentic, or you're suspicious that they may not be authentic. And that leads to a road of losing the trust and the credibility. And especially when you're trying to raise funds, one of the major pieces you're trying to make sure, even your team, when they go out, is to build that credibility with the donor so they can trust to give their finances, whatever that is, that gift, to you, so that you'll do the best that you can with it to meet the objective. And Barbara, you've done that so well in so many years. Can you speak to that and what that means, especially from the donor side, and what you think?
Sure. I think that's really the critical part of fundraising. It's relationship, right? So, and I think storytelling is really critically important when we're going through those relationships and building that kind of path with donors. People used to ask me all the time, how can you ask people for money? That must be so hard. How can you do that? And I would always respond, that's not what I do. What I do is meet with donors, reattach them in higher education or with any organization back to their roots with the organization, and then help make dreams come true. That's what we do. being able to be a storyteller, being able to take the information of the organization, but weave it into the language and the life goals of the donor is really the tipping point there. You know, I can sit down and meet with you, Shanda, and share my opinion, and you may or may not remember that. But if I weave a story and really help you achieve your goals throughout that process, then it's something that we can both take forward and both do something special with.
Well, I know as someone, or at least from my side, giving funds to someone who's sitting down with me and offering this, like, well, what's your dreams? What would you like to accomplish? What are you passionate about? And having someone ask me that, that's the first conversation. I'm open to that type of conversation. And I think that that's where I think that, you hit that right on the head on some of those best conversations that happen with donors. And that's authentic too, because the donor will tell you, and then they're going to want to know what can you do and what are the possibilities. And I have to admit, I started off thinking when I was donating heavily into one charity that I cared so much about, I really did want to know, like, what are the possibilities that they see. And they took what I was hoping for, they took it to the next level, things that I hadn't even thought of. And I said, oh,
Right.
that's fantastic. And so the question is when you're leading, both of you are leading teams, how do you get your teams to get motivated to go out and talk that same language with those potential donors?
That's such a huge part of our presentation, Shanda, which would not surprise you. But our premise is you're a leader no matter what chair you hold at the organization, no matter where you sit around that table and what your responsibility is. You're a leader, and leadership is a mindset. And so we need to start with that. So how do you raise your teams up by really empowering each one around the table, despite their title or their amount of expertise, the years that they've had in fundraising. But the other thing then is really helping them find their voice. I always talk about the BTP method, being bold, thoughtful, and persistent. There are times when you know the right thing to do for a donor, and you really need to manage up within the organization with senior leadership, but you also need to plant your flag on behalf of that donor and bring all your skills to the table. Sometimes you've got to do some really tough work when you're doing this. We believe that leadership is a mindset, that you need to be a lifelong learner. I mean, you mentioned the 20 plus years Joy and I both have in our industry, and the commitment to the advanced certification was a commitment we both made because we wanted to elevate ourselves to be at the top level, not for the recognition, but for the education and for the skill set and for the network. So we believe in that power of mentors and that critical need for everybody on the team to be developing their own professional network. Joy, what did I forget?
Well, there's so much wisdom being shared. And Shanda, I'd love to go back to what your insights into the philanthropic process from your personal experience. I value that so much because I have had many of the philanthropists I've worked with say, you heard something and saw something that I didn't even know was a passion in myself. And so I love that. And it's speaking of lightning in a bottle again, how do you take that type of intuitiveness and authenticity and listening and engagement and mentor your team? And it's something I'm in the process this past year. I just built a new team, and I'm in that process right now. And
timing is everything, Joy.
I know, it's so fresh right now, and I'm in it. And if you'll indulge me, we just did some team building this week, and if I could just take a step back, I think one of the leadership things, I chuckled the whole team building day. We were out I'm here in Boston. We were out on the Charles River all together, and just seeing the characters in each of my team members. I'm so curious about them and so interested and got such joy from hearing their experiences and sharing my observations, which they were so curious about. And there's such an important learning process that they can bring to their interactions with our community from just even that personal experience that we just had. So I'm fresh on this, and I love this conversation.
Well, the fact that you've had a retreat, and I say this to so many entrepreneurs, those that are leading organizations, you don't have to necessarily be involved in fundraising, but if you're leading a team, taking time out to do a retreat, to do professional development, having someone come in to actually help you do that so that the team can feel a little bit more comfortable. It's not always hearing from the boss. It makes a difference for you to really recalibrate. And, to Barbara's point, where she was talking about you getting the education and experience to go to the next level, we call that in Pen Leader being the sharpest you can be, and then being that point, that the sharpest point. Your team, you're helping them be sharp as well, because you bring your knowledge back to the table to say, I can share this. I have a gift to share with you, not only as your leader, but also with the knowledge that I've gained at the conferences, again, through your educational journey that you did for the certification. And so we need to slow down. I tell leaders, slow down, take it in, listen to your teams. And if you've got a donor, listen to your donor. I think that's really that strength of character, that sharpness. Now, you have strategic planning in your backgrounds. And we talk about in Pen Leader, we talk about having a plan and being straightforward and communicating that. Can you share how you go about planning when you're going through the process of preparing to reach out to someone for an ask?
Absolutely. Joy, let's do this. You talk about the process and I will add a story because we were talking about the importance of storytelling. So
I'm in. I'll just share one of the things that I like to do right out of the gate is I like to start with a formula. We often talk about fundraising being an art and a science. So this would be a little bit of the science part. I like to start with a formula so that we're all speaking the same language. We have the same vocabulary, and I need it. We work with so many constituents. As you mentioned, I'm here in higher education. So I work with a dean, I work with faculty, I work with staff that aren't a part of a fundraising team. I work with volunteers, I work with leadership volunteers on an advisory board, and then I have my team that is directly reporting to me, but I also have a team that's part of a larger fundraising office. And so how do we make sure that we're speaking the same language? That formula for me is having a perspective of what is the context of the story that we're trying to bring people into. Why now? What is the impetus? What is the vision of what will be different because of the engagement of individuals outside of our organization? What is our plan? How are we going to use a gift? How is the money going to be allocated and impactful? Why us? Mm-hmm. You could choose anyone to part with your hard-earned money. Why us? And what are we asking individuals to do for us? And so I start with this formula and I begin to really funnel everything through it. And sometimes this turns into a few paragraphs, but as long as they can answer these questions, then we can begin. It means we have the infrastructure in place. It means we have a shared vocabulary, and then we can start getting more creative and thinking about the broader perspective of strategic planning, which we do regularly every year. We annually, but how to bring everybody into that strategic plan, we have to be speaking the same language.
Shanda, one of the things that Joy and I marvel about our partnership all the time is that we do the same thing, but we do it differently. We kind of bring the IQ and the EQ to this partnership. I think what you said, Joy, is exactly on target. And in my world, I am a huge huge advocate of scripting. So if I'm going to work with a major or principal donor and my team is involved, everybody is scripted. We write the program for exactly how it's going to play out, especially if you have senior leadership involved in these visits. It is really down to the last detail articulated. Then I insist that everybody sets all that documentation aside and you lean in with your true self. You have to be, in my opinion, in a very vulnerable state if you're going to have these conversations with individuals and be open to pick up on all the nuance with the donor, right? That's when I think everybody brings the very best to the relationship. So my story, as you're talking, Joy, I'm thinking about the years and years I worked in for higher education, working up and down the East Coast, Boston, Philly, New York, DC, and occasionally later Florida. But one of the donors that I worked with in New York City, very successful individual, just very, very accomplished. And we had conversations, and honestly, conversations for 10 years, right? 10 years. And finally, at this one dinner, I just sat across the table and then said, you know what? I'll keep coming back and taking you out to dinner forever because I really love our conversations. But I'm just curious. Can I just ask straight up, is there something about this whole process that has touched your heart? You know, are you interested in supporting? And he basically said, I know all of the information you brought me about the university. You bring me something that shows how you can turn the lights on in the eyes of undergraduate students, and I'll support that financially.
Oh, wow.
And that's where we had, then going back to what you said, Shanda, then we had the content by which I could go back to the faculty, and then we knew what we were building. Then we knew where we were going. Fast forward another decade, it's hugely successful and has impacted, just hundreds and hundreds of students. And it's exciting and rewarding when you see it come full circle. That's why we do what we do.
That's right there is a clear indication of stopping, taking the moment and listening and really engaging. Like, okay, where are we going? Where the ship is going? Where do you want it to go? What interests you? And for those who are like, well, I don't really fundraise within my organization. You are, and for those that are not fundraising, but if you have services, if you have clients, if you're providing a product out, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're raising funds, but you are selling something that somebody else needs. The reaching out and understanding what your clients, your customers need is at the heart of anything that has to do with providing a service or product. And I think you hit that on the head too. For those that are not fundraising, this show is so much for those across the board. If you care about your customer base, if you care about your clients, if you care about that reaching out and making dreams happen, this show is definitely for you. I can't thank
Absolutely.
I can't thank either one of you enough to come on and bring all of that to the forefront to make us really think and step back and think about it. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. It's such an honor to get to visit and to spend some time with your audience talking about these critical efforts every day. We have a lot of response during our presentations to one of the answers. It's an answer that's to the question, what keeps you up at night? And the answer is chaos.
And a little bit of that going on around the world right now too, right? Just a tad.
Just a tad
chaos. So how to maintain calm in chaos and take a moment and know that you're not alone and that there are so many, and hopefully Barbara and I can demonstrate through this conversation what it means to have each other. We've never worked together formally in the same space, if you will. So how you can align, and Shanda, how we have aligned. You're not alone in the chaos, and there are answers and mentorship and soundboarding opportunities out there.
Absolutely.
That's perfect. So for those who are saying, wait a minute, I've got a desk full of paper, or I've got 4 meetings on how am I going to get to all of them. You're not alone out there. You're not alone. So I love that. Calm amongst the chaos. Thank you for that. It's a good one. And we'd also like to thank our listeners for, sharing the show and liking it. We appreciate you. If you have any feedback, you can provide it at info@mazeassociatesltd.com. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Jennifer Pensician, who is a wonderful financial advisor at Edward Jones. She's trying to make plans and help you reach your passions when you are retiring. So thank you, Jennifer Pensician. And again, the Pen Leader Path book is out. As many of you already know, we have hit #1 in HR and personnel management and for a new release, and we're excited about that. Make sure to check on the website at shandagore.com to see where the events and signings are happening. So until next time.
The Pen Leader podcast is hosted by Dr. Shanda Gore and brought to you by Maze & Associates LTD, creating customized solutions for growth in the areas of leadership development, strategic planning, and culture building. Find out more at www.mazeassociatesltd.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Pen Leader podcast and share with others.